Eleanor Martinez sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills in front of her. The numbers seemed to grow bigger every time she looked at them. Rent was due in 3 days. Her mother's medical bills kept coming in the mail, and her bank account was nearly empty. She was 28 years old and worked as a piano teacher. She loved music more than anything in the world, but loving music did not pay the bills. She had only 5 students, and 2 of them had just quit because their parents said lessons were too expensive. Eleanor rubbed her tired eyes. She had been up late the night before, playing piano at a restaurant to earn extra money. The tips were small, but every dollar helped. She looked at her phone, hoping for a message from someone wanting piano lessons. Nothing. The phone suddenly rang, making her jump. She did not recognize the number, but she answered anyway. Maybe it was a new student. Hello? Eleanor said, "Is this Eleanor Martinez, the piano teacher?" An old woman's voice came through the phone. The voice was shaky but clear. "Yes, this is Eleanor. How can I help you?" "My name is Margaret Whitmore. I need piano lessons. Can you come to my house?" Eleanor felt a small spark of hope. "Of course. I can do that. How many lessons would you like each week?" 2 lessons a week, please. "I will pay you well." Eleanor's heart beat faster. 2 lessons a week meant more money. Money she desperately needed. That sounds wonderful. What would you like to learn? There was a pause on the other end. Then Margaret spoke again. "Just one song. I only want to learn one song." Eleanor found this strange. Most people wanted to learn many songs, but she needed the money too badly to ask questions. "Okay, what song?" "Für Elise" by Beethoven. "Do you know it?" Eleanor smiled for the first time that day. "Yes, I know it very well. It's a beautiful piece. Good. Can you come tomorrow? I live at 847 Elmwood Avenue. Come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." Eleanor wrote down the address. "I'll be there." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Whitmore." "Thank you, dear. I will see you tomorrow." The phone call ended. Eleanor looked at the address she had written down. Elmwood Avenue was in the rich part of Boston. The houses there were huge and expensive. She wondered what kind of person Margaret Whitmore was. That night, Eleanor could not sleep well. She kept thinking about the new student. Why did an old woman want to learn only one song? And why for Elise? The questions filled her mind, but she pushed them away. She needed this job. That was all that mattered. The next day, Eleanor took the bus to Elmwood Avenue. She wore her best dress and carried her teaching materials in an old bag. As the bus drove through the neighborhood, she stared out the window. The houses got bigger and bigger. Beautiful trees lined the streets. Everything looked perfect and expensive. The bus stopped at the corner of Elmwood Avenue. Eleanor got off and walked down the street, looking at the house numbers. When she reached number 847, she stopped and stared. The house was enormous. It was a Victorian mansion with 3 floors and a tower on one side. The paint was old and peeling in some places. The garden was overgrown with weeds. But Eleanor could see that this house had once been very beautiful. It still had a kind of sad beauty, like an old queen who had seen better days. Eleanor walked up the stone path to the front door. Her hands shook a little as she rang the doorbell. She heard it echo inside the big house. Then she heard footsteps. The door opened. An old woman stood there looking at Eleanor with bright, sharp eyes. She was small and thin, with white hair pulled back in a bun. She wore an elegant dress that looked very expensive but very old. Her hands shook slightly as she held the door. "You must be Eleanor," the woman said. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, it's nice to meet you." "Come in, dear." "Come in." Eleanor stepped inside. The entrance hall was huge. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, covered in dust. A grand staircase curved up to the 2nd floor. Old paintings hung on the walls. Everything in the house looked expensive but forgotten, like a museum that no one visited anymore. "This way," Margaret said, leading Eleanor through the hall. They walked into a large living room, and there, in the corner, sat the most beautiful piano Eleanor had ever seen. It was a Steinway grand piano, black and shining even under a layer of dust. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. This piano was worth more than everything she owned. "That's my husband's piano," Margaret said quietly. "He was a conductor. He died 5 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Eleanor said. Margaret nodded but said nothing. She walked to the piano and ran her hand across the top. "No one has played this piano in a long time. Not since—" She stopped talking and looked away. Eleanor noticed photographs on the walls. Most of them showed a young girl at piano recitals. The girl had dark hair and a bright smile. In some photos, she was very young, maybe 6 years old. In others, she was a teenager. In every photo, she sat at a piano. "Who is that?" Eleanor asked, pointing at the photos. Margaret's face changed. For a moment, she looked very sad. Then the expression was gone. "That's not important now. Let's talk about the lessons." Eleanor felt she had asked the wrong question, but she did not know why. She sat down on the piano bench and opened her bag. "Okay, you said you want to learn for Elise?" "Yes, I learned it when I was a girl. But I can't remember it anymore. I want to learn it again." "That's a lovely reason. May I ask why this particular song?" Margaret sat in a chair near the piano. Her hands were folded in her lap and they shook a little. "It's important to me. That's all." Eleanor could tell Margaret did not want to talk about it. She decided not to push. "All right. Have you played piano recently?" "Not for many years. My hands don't work as well as they used to." Eleanor looked at Margaret's hands. They were old and thin, with age spots and trembling fingers. Learning piano would not be easy for her. But Eleanor had taught older students before. She knew it was possible with patience. "That's okay. We'll go slowly. Let me play the piece for you first so you can hear it." Eleanor placed her hands on the keys. The piano was slightly out of tune, but it still sounded beautiful. She began to play Für Elise. The familiar melody filled the room. She played with feeling, letting the music flow through her fingers. When she finished, she looked at Margaret. The old woman had tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," Margaret whispered. "That's exactly how I remember it." "Would you like to try now?" Eleanor asked gently. Margaret stood up slowly and came to the piano. She sat down next to Eleanor on the bench. "I don't know if I can. We'll start with just the first few notes. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Just try." Eleanor showed Margaret where to place her fingers. She played the first 3 notes slowly. "E D sharp E like this. Now you try." Margaret's trembling fingers found the keys. She pressed them carefully. E D sharp E. The notes came out simple and clear. "Good," Eleanor said with real happiness in her voice. "That's perfect, see? You can do this." A small smile appeared on Margaret's face. "I did it. You did. Let's try it again." They worked on just those 3 notes for 15 minutes. Margaret kept forgetting which key came next. She would play E, then pause, looking confused. Eleanor never showed any frustration. She just smiled and showed her again. And again. And again. "It's okay if you don't remember right away," Eleanor said. "Learning takes time. Your brain is making new connections. Every time you practice, it gets easier." Margaret looked at her with those sharp eyes. "You're very patient. Most young people don't have patience with old people." Eleanor shrugged. "My mother is sick. I take care of her. I've learned that patience is important. Everyone deserves kindness, especially when they're trying to learn something new." Something changed in Margaret's expression. She looked at Eleanor differently now, with more interest. "Your mother is sick? I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you. She has heart problems. The medical bills are very expensive." Eleanor did not know why she said that. She usually did not talk about her problems with students, but something about Margaret made her feel comfortable. "That must be very difficult for you," Margaret said. "It is. But we manage. Music helps. When things get hard, I play piano and I feel better." Margaret nodded slowly. "Yes, music does help. My husband used to say that music is medicine for the soul." They continued the lesson. By the end of the hour, Margaret could play the first measure of Für Elise. It was slow and shaky, but she could do it. Eleanor could see the pride in the old woman's eyes. "You did wonderful today," Eleanor said as she packed her bag. "Practice these notes every day if you can. Just a few minutes is enough." "I will," Margaret promised. "Will you come back on Thursday?" "Of course." "Same time?" "Yes, 2 o'clock." As Eleanor stood to leave, she looked around the room again. The house was so big and so empty. "Do you live here alone, Mrs. Whitmore?" "Yes, just me. And Rosa, my housekeeper. She comes 3 times a week. It's a big house for one person." Margaret's face became sad again. "Yes, it is. It used to be full of music and laughter. Now it's just quiet." Eleanor felt sorry for her. She understood loneliness. Since her mother got sick, Eleanor did not have time for friends. Most days she only talked to her mother and her few students. "Well, we'll fill it with music again," Eleanor said with a smile. "At least twice a week." Margaret smiled back. It was a real smile this time, reaching her eyes. Yes, I would like that very much. Eleanor left the mansion and walked back to the bus stop. As she waited for the bus, she thought about Margaret. There was a story there, she was sure. A sad story about the girl in the photographs and why the house was so empty now. But it was not her business to ask. She was just the piano teacher. Still, she felt a connection to Margaret. They were both lonely. They both had problems. And they both loved music. The bus arrived and Eleanor got on. As it drove away, she looked back at the big old house. Margaret stood at the window watching her leave. Eleanor waved and Margaret waved back. Eleanor did not know it then, but this job would change her life in ways she could never imagine. It would teach her that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the biggest surprises. And it would show her that true wealth has nothing to do with money. For now, though, she was just happy to have a new student, a student who would pay her bills and help her take care of her mother. That was enough. The bus carried her back to her small apartment where bills waited on the kitchen table and her mother slept in the next room. Eleanor thought about Margaret's shaking hands on the piano keys. She thought about the sad, empty house. And she thought about the mysterious girl in all those photographs. On Thursday, she would return. And the story would continue. Neither of them knew where it would lead. But both of them needed it. Margaret needed someone to bring music back into her life. And Eleanor needed someone who would appreciate her patience and kindness. Sometimes that's how the most important relationships begin. Not with great plans or clear purposes. Just two people, brought together by need and circumstance, finding something unexpected in each other. Something that would grow into something neither of them could have predicted. The piano lesson was just the beginning. Thursday came quickly. Eleanor took the bus back to Elmwood Avenue with her teaching materials and a small gift. She had baked lemon cookies the night before. Her mother had taught her the recipe years ago. Eleanor thought Margaret might enjoy them. When Eleanor rang the doorbell, a different woman answered. She was middle-aged, with dark hair and kind eyes. She wore an apron and held a dish towel. "You must be the piano teacher," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Rosa, Mrs. Whitmore's housekeeper. Come in. She's been waiting for you all morning." Eleanor stepped inside. "It's nice to meet you, Rosa." Rosa looked at the container in Eleanor's hands. "What did you bring?" "Just some cookies." "I thought Mrs. Whitmore might like them." Rosa's smile grew wider. "That's very thoughtful. Mrs. Whitmore loves lemon cookies. They're her favorite." "How did you know?" "I didn't know. I just got lucky, I guess." Rosa led Eleanor to the living room. Margaret sat in the same chair as before, but today she wore a different dress, also elegant and old. Her face lit up when she saw Eleanor. "You came back," Margaret said. "Of course I did. I said I would," Eleanor replied, sitting at the piano. "Some people say they'll come back, but they don't." Eleanor heard the sadness in those words. She wondered how many people had disappointed Margaret. "Well, I keep my promises, and I brought you something." She handed Margaret the container of cookies. Margaret opened it and smiled. "Lemon cookies. These are my favorite." "How wonderful," Rosa told me, "but I didn't know when I made them. Sometimes lucky guesses happen." Margaret took a cookie and bit into it. "These are delicious. Your mother taught you well." "She did. She can't bake anymore because of her illness, so I bake for both of us now." They shared the cookies and talked for a few minutes. Then they began the lesson. Eleanor asked Margaret to play what she had practiced. Margaret's fingers found the keys slowly. E D sharp, E D sharp, E B D C A. She made mistakes. She forgot notes. Her hands shook. But Eleanor could see she had practiced. "She had tried. That's wonderful," Eleanor said. "You've been practicing." "I can tell." Margaret looked pleased. "I practiced every day. Sometimes I forget what comes next, so I wrote the notes down on paper." "That's a great idea. Some of my best students take notes. It helps the brain remember." They worked on the next section of the piece. Eleanor showed Margaret the notes and played them slowly. Then she had Margaret try. Over and over they repeated the same measures. Eleanor never got impatient. She never sighed or looked at her watch. She just kept teaching with a smile. After 30 minutes, Margaret stopped playing. She looked tired. "I need to rest for a moment. My hands hurt." "Of course. Let's take a break. Would you like some tea?" Margaret's face brightened. "That would be lovely. Rosa makes excellent tea." Eleanor went to find Rosa in the kitchen. The kitchen was as big as Eleanor's entire apartment. Rosa was washing dishes and humming to herself. "Mrs. Whitmore would like some tea," Eleanor said. "May I help you?" Rosa turned around, surprised. "You don't have to help. You're the teacher. I don't mind. I like helping." Rosa studied Eleanor's face for a moment. Then she nodded. "All right. You can get the cups from that cabinet. The nice china ones." As they prepared the tea, Rosa spoke quietly. "Mrs. Whitmore seems happy today. She was excited about your lesson. She talked about you at breakfast." "Really? What did she say?" "She said you're very patient and kind. She said you don't treat her like she's stupid when she forgets things." Eleanor felt her throat tighten with emotion. She's not stupid. She's learning something new. That's hard at any age. Rosa put tea bags in a beautiful old teapot. Not everyone sees it that way. Her son visited last month. He got angry when she couldn't remember things. He thinks she's losing her mind. Does she have memory problems? Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Eleanor carefully, as if deciding whether to trust her. "The doctor says she has early dementia. It's not bad yet, but it's getting worse slowly. Some days are better than others." Eleanor's heart sank. She understood now why Margaret sometimes looked confused, why her hands shook so much. That must be very difficult for her. It is. And she's so lonely. Her son doesn't visit much. He's angry with her, I think, about something that happened years ago. And she has no friends. They all stopped coming after her husband died. What about the girl in the photographs? Who is she? Rosa's face became very sad. That's Claire, Mrs. Whitmore's granddaughter. She died 10 years ago. Car accident. She was only 16. Eleanor felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. Oh no, that's terrible. It destroyed the whole family. Claire was a piano genius. Everyone said she would be famous someday. Mrs. Whitmore loved her very much. After Claire died, Mrs. Whitmore never played piano again. She couldn't even look at the piano for years. And Für Elise, that was the first piece Claire ever learned. When she was 6 years old. Mrs. Whitmore was so proud of her that day. Everything made sense now. The sadness in Margaret's eyes, the empty house, the need to learn that one special song. Eleanor felt tears in her own eyes. That's why she wants to learn it, Eleanor whispered. She wants to feel close to Claire again. Rosa nodded. I think so. But she never talks about Claire. The grief is still too strong. They carried the tea back to the living room on a silver tray. Margaret sat in her chair looking at the piano. She seemed lost in thought. Here's your tea, Mrs. Whitmore, Eleanor said gently. Margaret looked up and smiled. Thank you, dear. Please sit with me. Let's not rush back to the lesson. They sat together, drinking tea from delicate china cups. The afternoon sun came through the tall windows, making patterns on the old carpet. For a while, they just sat in comfortable silence. Then Margaret began to talk. My husband was a wonderful man. His name was Robert. He conducted the Boston Symphony Orchestra for 20 years. This house was always full of musicians and music. We had parties every month. The piano was never quiet. It sounds beautiful, Eleanor said. It was. We were very happy. Margaret's eyes looked far away, seeing the past. I used to dance, ballet. That's how Robert and I met. I was dancing and he was conducting the orchestra. He said I moved like music looked. Eleanor smiled. That's very romantic. He was a romantic man. We had one son, Richard. He never loved music the way we did. He became a lawyer, a very successful lawyer. But he and Robert never understood each other. Margaret sipped her tea. Her hands shook and the cup rattled against the saucer. Then we had Claire, our granddaughter. She was different. She loved music from the moment she was born. By age 4, she was playing piano. By age 10, she was performing in concerts. Everyone said she was special. Eleanor stayed quiet, letting Margaret talk. She used to practice on that piano for hours every day. The house was full of music again. Robert was so proud of her. I was proud of her. We thought, Margaret's voice broke a little. We thought she would do amazing things. What happened to her? Eleanor asked softly, even though Rosa had already told her. Margaret was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very quiet. Car accident. A drunk driver. She died instantly. She was 16 years old. That was 10 years ago. I'm so sorry. Richard blamed me. He said I pushed her too hard with music. He said I made her practice too much. He said if she hadn't been coming home from a piano competition that night, she would still be alive. Tears rolled down Margaret's wrinkled cheeks. Maybe he's right. Maybe it was my fault. Eleanor set down her teacup and moved to sit next to Margaret. She took the old woman's shaking hand. It wasn't your fault. It was an accident. A terrible, unfair accident. But it wasn't your fault. I haven't played piano since that day. I couldn't. Every time I looked at the piano, I saw Claire sitting there. I heard her music. I felt the pain all over again. But you're playing now. You're learning again. That's very brave. Margaret looked at Eleanor with wet eyes. I don't feel brave. I feel old and scared and tired. But I want to play for Elise one more time before I forget everything. Before my mind is gone completely. I want to remember Claire. I want to honor her memory. Eleanor squeezed Margaret's hand. Then that's what we'll do. We'll learn this piece together. And every time you play it, you'll be honoring Claire. You'll be keeping her music alive. They sat together for a while longer. Then they returned to the piano. This time, when Margaret played, Eleanor saw something different. She saw love in every note. She saw grief and memory and hope all mixed together. The lesson ended, but Eleanor did not leave right away. She stayed and talked with Margaret about music and life and memories. She learned that Margaret's favorite color was blue, that she loved gardening but couldn't do it anymore because of her arthritis, that she missed having people in her house. When Eleanor finally left, she felt different. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was something more. She cared about Margaret. She wanted to help her, not just for money, but because it felt right. On the bus ride home, Eleanor thought about Claire, a young girl who loved music so much, a girl who would never grow up, never play piano again, never fulfill her dreams. Life was so unfair sometimes. Eleanor thought about her own mother, sick in bed, about how quickly life could change, how important it was to be kind to people, to take time with them, to listen to their stories. She decided something on that bus ride. She would be more than just Margaret's piano teacher. She would be her friend, because Margaret needed a friend. And honestly, so did Eleanor. The next lesson was on Monday. When Eleanor arrived, Margaret seemed confused. She did not remember Eleanor right away. "Who are you?" Margaret asked at the door. Eleanor's heart sank, but she kept smiling. "I'm Eleanor, your piano teacher. We have a lesson today." Recognition slowly came to Margaret's face. "Oh yes, Eleanor, the patient one. Come in, this lesson was harder." Margaret forgot what they had worked on. She could not remember the notes they had practiced. She got frustrated with herself. "I'm sorry," Margaret said, her voice shaking. "I can't remember." "Why can't I remember?" "It's okay," Eleanor said calmly. "We'll just go over it again. There's no rush. We have all the time we need." But inside, Eleanor felt worried. Rosa had said the dementia was getting worse. How much worse would it get? Would there come a day when Margaret did not remember her at all? Eleanor pushed those thoughts away. She focused on the present moment, on teaching Margaret one note at a time, on being patient and kind and encouraging. After the lesson, Eleanor did something new. She took out her phone. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to record you playing what we learned today. Then you can watch the video when you practice. That way, if you forget, you can see yourself doing it." Margaret's face lit up. What a clever idea. Eleanor recorded Margaret playing the first section of Für Elise. It was slow and had mistakes, but Margaret was trying hard. When they watched the video together, Margaret smiled. "I did that? I actually did that." "You did. And you'll do even better with practice." Eleanor also wrote out the notes on colorful paper with big letters. She taped them to the piano where Margaret could see them easily. She showed Margaret how to practice just 5 minutes at a time so her hands would not hurt. "You're so creative," Margaret said. "You think of things to help me. Other teachers would have given up on me by now. I'm not other teachers, and I won't give up on you. We're learning this piece together, remember? You and me, a team." Margaret hugged Eleanor before she left. It surprised both of them, but it felt right. Like they were becoming more than teacher and student. They were becoming friends. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor came twice a week like clockwork. Some days Margaret remembered her immediately. Other days it took a few minutes. But slowly Margaret was learning the piece. The muscle memory was forming. Even on her confused days, her fingers seemed to remember the notes better than her mind did. Eleanor started staying longer than the hour she was paid for. She helped Margaret with small things. She read to her from books. She helped organize Margaret's medications. She brought flowers from the cheap store to brighten up the living room. Rosa noticed everything. "You're very good to her," she told Eleanor one day. "You don't have to do all these extra things." Eleanor shrugged. "I want to. She's alone so much, and she's so kind. Everyone deserves kindness in return." But Eleanor did not tell Rosa the whole truth. The truth was that coming to Margaret's house had become the best part of her week. In this big, quiet house playing piano with a lonely old woman, Eleanor felt peaceful. She felt needed. She felt like she was doing something that mattered. Her mother's bills still piled up at home. Eleanor still worked late nights at the restaurant. Money was still tight. But twice a week, she came to this house and forgot about all of that. She just played music and talked and laughed with Margaret, and Margaret was changing too. She smiled more. She seemed less sad. The house did not feel quite so empty anymore. Neither of them knew that someone was watching. Someone who did not trust Eleanor. Someone who thought she was taking advantage of a sick old woman, and that person was about to make things very difficult. Eleanor was helping Margaret practice on a cold November afternoon when they heard a car door slam outside. Margaret's hand stopped moving on the piano keys. Her face went pale. "Richard is here," she whispered. "Your son?" Eleanor asked. Margaret nodded. She looked nervous. "He doesn't like visitors. He thinks people are trying to take advantage of me." Before Eleanor could respond, the front door opened. Heavy footsteps echoed in the entrance hall. A man's voice called out, "Mother, where are you?" "In here," Margaret called back, her voice shaking. A tall man walked into the living room. He was about 50 years old, wearing an expensive suit. His face was stern and hard. He looked like someone who never smiled. His eyes went from Margaret to Eleanor, and his expression darkened. "Who is this?" he demanded. "This is Eleanor Martinez. She's my piano teacher," Margaret said quickly. "Eleanor, this is my son, Richard." Eleanor stood up and offered her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Whitmore." Richard did not shake her hand. He just stared at her with suspicion. "Piano teacher? Mother, you haven't played piano in years. What's this really about?" "I wanted to learn again," Margaret said quietly. "Eleanor is teaching me Für Elise." Richard's face turned red. "Für Elise? That was Claire's song. How dare you hire someone to teach you that song?" "Richard, please don't get upset," Margaret said. She looked scared now, but Richard was not listening. He turned to Eleanor. "How much are you charging her? How much money are you taking from my mother?" Eleanor felt her face grow hot. "I charge $40 per lesson. That's my normal rate." $40? Richard laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "And how many lessons have you had?" "Twice a week for 6 weeks," Eleanor said honestly. "That's 12 lessons." Richard pulled out his phone and calculated. "So you've taken almost $500 from a sick old woman who barely knows what day it is. That's very convenient for you, isn't it?" "Richard." Margaret stood up, her face angry now. "Don't talk to Eleanor like that. She's been wonderful to me. I'm sure she has been, Mother. People are always wonderful when there's money involved." Eleanor felt tears of anger and hurt in her eyes, but she refused to cry. "Mr. Whitmore, I understand you're protective of your mother, but I'm not taking advantage of her. I'm just teaching her piano." "Right. And I suppose you also bring her cookies and stay longer than your paid time because you're so generous?" Richard's voice was sharp with sarcasm. Eleanor's mouth opened in surprise. How did he know about the cookies? About the extra time? Richard saw her expression. "Rosa tells me everything. I asked her to watch you, to see what you were really doing here." "Rosa?" Eleanor felt betrayed. Rosa had seemed so kind. "I pay Rosa's salary," Richard said coldly. "She works for me, not for my mother. I needed to know if you were a scam artist." Margaret sat back down heavily in her chair. She looked very old and very tired. "Richard, you asked Rosa to spy on Eleanor. How could you?" "How could I?" "How could I not, Mother? You have dementia. Your judgment is impaired. You can't make good decisions anymore. I have to protect you from people who want to steal from you. Eleanor is not stealing from me." Margaret's voice was loud now, louder than Eleanor had ever heard it. "She's been kind to me. She's patient with me. She treats me like a person, not like a broken thing. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? The cookies, the extra time, the friendliness. It's all a strategy. She's buttering you up so she can ask you for money later. Eleanor had heard enough. She picked up her bag. I should go. I'm sorry I caused problems. No. Margaret reached out and grabbed Eleanor's hand. Don't go. Please don't go. Mother, let her leave, Richard said. This charade is over. I'll find you a real piano teacher if you actually want lessons. Someone professional. Someone who isn't trying to become your best friend to get into your bank account. Eleanor looked at Margaret's hand holding hers. The old woman's eyes were full of tears. Eleanor's heart broke. Mrs. Whitmore, Eleanor said gently. Maybe your son is right. Maybe it's better if I don't come anymore. I don't want to cause trouble in your family. You're not causing trouble. Richard is causing trouble. Margaret glared at her son. You're always causing trouble, just like you did with Claire. Richard's face went white. What did you say? You heard me. You blamed me for Claire's death. You said I pushed her too hard. You said it was my fault. And then you stopped coming to see me. You abandoned me when I needed you most. That's not fair, Richard said, but his voice was weaker now. It's the truth. You were angry and hurt and you took it out on me. And now I'm finally trying to do something that makes me happy and you're trying to take that away too. Silence filled the room. Eleanor did not know what to say. This was a family matter. She did not belong here. I lost my daughter, Richard finally said. His voice cracked. My only child. And you were so focused on her music career that you never saw how stressed she was, how tired she was, how much pressure she felt. I know, Margaret whispered. I've thought about it every day for 10 years. I've blamed myself every day. But Claire loved music. It wasn't just me pushing her. She wanted it too. We'll never know that for sure now, will we? She's gone. The pain in Richard's voice was obvious. Eleanor realized that he was not just angry. He was grieving. He was still grieving after all these years. And so was Margaret. They were both trapped in their grief, unable to forgive each other or themselves. Mr. Whitmore, Eleanor said quietly, I lost my father when I was 12, cancer, and my mother and I blamed ourselves for not catching it earlier. We blamed each other for stupid little things. We almost destroyed our relationship. But then my mother got sick too and I realized something. Life is too short to waste on blame. It's too short to stay angry at the people we love. Richard looked at her. For the first time, his face softened a little. Eleanor continued. I'm not trying to steal from your mother. I'm not trying to manipulate her. I'm just teaching her piano because she asked me to. And yes, I bring her cookies and stay longer than I'm paid for, but not because I want something from her. I do it because she's lonely, and because I'm lonely too, and because sometimes just being kind to another person is its own reward. You're lonely? Richard asked, skepticism back in his voice. Young woman like you? My mother is very sick. Heart disease. I take care of her every day. I work 3 jobs to pay her medical bills. I don't have time for friends or a social life. Coming here twice a week is the only time I feel like I'm doing something meaningful, something that matters. Eleanor picked up her bag again. But I don't want to cause problems between you and your mother. So I'll go. I hope you both can find peace. She walked toward the door. Margaret called after her. Eleanor, please. But Eleanor kept walking. She walked out of the living room, through the entrance hall and out the front door. Tears ran down her face now. She did not try to stop them. She had grown to care about Margaret. More than she realized. The old woman had become important to her. And now it was over, just like that. Because of suspicion and anger and old family wounds that had never healed. Eleanor walked to the bus stop. She sat on the bench and cried. She felt foolish. Richard was probably right. She had gotten too close. She had crossed the line between teacher and student. She had started to think of Margaret as a friend, maybe even like a grandmother. And that was a mistake. The bus came. Eleanor got on and rode home. She went to her apartment and found her mother sleeping. She sat at their old beat-up piano and played Fur-Elise. She played it and cried. She would need to find a new student to replace Margaret. She needed the money too badly to lose that income. But the thought of teaching someone else made her feel empty. 3 days passed. Eleanor did not hear from Margaret. She tried not to think about the old woman in the big empty house. She tried to forget the hurt in Margaret's eyes when she left. She tried to forget everything. On the 4th day, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Eleanor almost did not answer. But something made her pick up. Hello?
Eleanor?
This is Rosa. Eleanor's heart jumped. Hi, Rosa. I need to tell you something. I need to apologize. Rosa's voice sounded upset. I didn't want to spy on you. Mr. Richard made me. He pays my salary and I need this job. I have 3 children to feed. I couldn't say no to him. It's okay, Rosa, I understand. No, it's not okay. What I saw when I watched you made me feel terrible. You're so good to Mrs. Whitmore, so patient and kind. And I had to report everything to Mr. Richard and I knew he would twist it into something bad. Why are you calling me? Because Mrs. Whitmore is not doing well. She's been crying every day since you left. She won't eat. She barely gets out of bed. She keeps asking for you. She sits at the piano and cries. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry. But her son doesn't want me there. I know. But I had to tell you. You should know that you mattered to her. You made her happy. For the first time in years, she was happy. After Rosa hung up, Eleanor sat on her bed and stared at the wall. She wanted to go back to Margaret. She wanted to finish teaching her Für Elise. She wanted to make the old woman smile again, but she could not. Richard had made it clear she was not welcome. And maybe he was right to protect his mother. Eleanor was just the piano teacher. She had no right to be more than that. Another week passed. Eleanor found a new student, a teenage boy who did not want to be there and barely tried. She played piano at the restaurant at night, where drunk people talked loudly and no one really listened to the music. Everything felt gray and meaningless. She realized that the time with Margaret had been special. It had given her purpose beyond just surviving. It had reminded her why she loved music in the first place. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Eleanor was home with her mother when someone knocked on her apartment door. Eleanor opened it and froze. Richard Whitmore stood in the hallway. He looked different than before. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His face looked tired. He did not look angry anymore. He looked sad. Mr. Whitmore, what are you doing here? Can I come in? I need to talk to you. Eleanor hesitated, then opened the door wider. Richard stepped into the small apartment. He looked around at the tiny space, the old furniture, the medical equipment for Eleanor's mother in the corner. My mother asked me to come, Richard said. She made me promise I would talk to you. How is she? Not good. She's very depressed. She won't play the piano. She barely eats. The doctor says depression can make her dementia worse. Richard ran his hand through his hair. I'm worried about her. I'm worried about her too. Richard sat down on Eleanor's old couch. He looked uncomfortable, but he stayed. I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. I was suspicious and rude, and I'm sorry. Eleanor sat down across from him. You were trying to protect your mother. I understand that. I was. But I was also wrong. I asked Rosa to keep watching you even after I told you to leave. Do you know what she reported? Eleanor shook her head. She said you came back. 3 times. You stood outside the house looking at my mother's window. You never knocked. You never went in. You just stood there for a few minutes, then left. Like you wanted to check on her but didn't want to cause trouble. Eleanor felt her face turn red. She had done that. She could not help herself. She had to know if Margaret was okay. Rosa also told me that you never asked my mother for money, not once. You never asked for anything except what you earned for the lessons, and you left personal items at the house. Your good pen, a book, things that suggest you plan to come back, things that suggest you actually cared. I did care. I do care. Richard looked at Eleanor with eyes that were very much like his mother's. Why? Why do you care so much about an old woman you barely know? Eleanor thought about the question. Because she treated me like I mattered. Because she listened to me. Because when I was with her, I didn't feel like just another person struggling to survive. I felt like I was doing something important. Teaching her wasn't just a job. It was meaningful. She feels the same way about you. She told me you're the first person in years who treated her like a real person, not like a sick old woman, not like someone to pity, just like a person. Richard stood up and walked to the window. Rain ran down the glass. I blamed my mother for Claire's death. That's true, but really I blamed myself. I was so busy with my career. I missed so many of Claire's concerts, so many important moments, and then she was gone and I couldn't get those moments back. It was easier to blame my mother than to face my own guilt. It's not too late, Eleanor said. She's still here. You still have time. Richard turned back to Eleanor. Will you come back? Will you teach her again? She needs you, and I promise I won't interfere anymore. Eleanor wanted to say yes immediately, but she had to be honest. Mr. Whitmore, I don't know how much time your mother has left. The dementia will get worse. There may come a day when she doesn't remember me at all. When she can't learn anymore. Are you prepared for that? No, but I need to try. We both need to try. She wants to learn that song, and I want to help her do it, even if it's the last thing she ever learns. Eleanor nodded slowly. Okay, I'll come back. But I have one condition. What is it? You have to visit her more often. She needs her family. I can be her teacher and her friend. But you're her son. She needs you most of all. Richard's eyes filled with tears. I will, I promise. The next day, Eleanor went back to the big house on Elmwood Avenue. When Margaret opened the door and saw her standing there, the old woman started crying. They hugged each other and Eleanor cried too. I'm sorry I left, Eleanor said. I'm sorry my son was cruel to you, Margaret replied. They went to the piano together. Margaret's fingers were shaky, but she remembered more than Eleanor expected. The muscle memory was still there. They worked on Für Elise, and slowly the music came back, and this time it felt different. This time Eleanor knew that what they were doing was more than just piano lessons. They were building something real, a friendship that would be tested by time and illness and loss, but a friendship that was worth fighting for. Winter came to Boston. Snow covered the streets and piled up on the sidewalks. Eleanor continued her lessons with Margaret twice a week, never missing a day even when the weather was terrible. Richard kept his promise too. He started visiting his mother every Sunday for lunch. The change in their relationship was slow but real. At first, Richard and Margaret sat together in awkward silence, not knowing what to say after years of distance. But gradually they started talking. About small things at first, the weather, the news, old memories that did not hurt too much. Eleanor saw the change in Margaret. The old woman smiled more now. She had something to look forward to. Piano lessons on Tuesday and Thursday. Richard's visits on Sunday. The house felt less empty, but Margaret's dementia was getting worse. Some days she was clear and alert. Other days she was confused about where she was or what year it was. Eleanor learned to adapt. On good days, they worked on new parts of Für Elise. On bad days, they just played music together and talked. One cold December afternoon, Eleanor arrived for a lesson and found Margaret very excited. The old woman was wearing a beautiful evening gown, dark blue with silver beads. Her white hair was styled nicely. She wore pearl earrings that must have been very expensive. Mrs. Whitmore, you look beautiful, Eleanor said. Is there a special occasion? Margaret smiled like a child with a secret. Yes, we're having a recital today. A recital? Yes, I want to play for an audience. Like the old days. Will you help me? Eleanor was confused, but she saw how happy Margaret looked. Of course. What do you want me to do? Help me set up the living room like a concert hall. We need chairs for the audience. And candles. We need lots of candles. Eleanor wanted to ask who the audience would be, but she did not want to upset Margaret. So she helped. They arranged chairs in rows facing the piano. They lit candles and placed them around the room. Rosa helped too, bringing out fancy glasses and cookies on silver trays. When everything was ready, Margaret sat in the front row of empty chairs. She looked at Eleanor expectantly. Now you play. Give me a concert, Eleanor understood then. In Margaret's mind, there was an audience. Maybe she was remembering the old days when the house was full of musicians and guests. Maybe she was living in the past when her husband was alive and Claire was still a little girl learning piano. It did not matter. If Margaret wanted a concert, Eleanor would give her a concert. Eleanor sat at the beautiful Steinway piano. She looked at Margaret in her fancy dress, sitting in the front row of empty chairs, and then Eleanor began to play. She played Chopin, beautiful and sad. She played Mozart, light and joyful. She played Beethoven, powerful and moving. She played every piece she knew from memory, pouring her heart into the music. Margaret sat perfectly still, listening. Her eyes were closed. A smile played on her lips. Once Eleanor saw tears running down the old woman's cheeks, but they seemed like happy tears. Finally, Eleanor played Für Elise. She played it slowly and carefully, the way she had taught Margaret. She played it with all the love and patience and hope she felt. When she finished, Margaret stood up and clapped. She clapped and clapped, standing alone in the empty room. Bravo, bravo! Beautiful! Eleanor stood and bowed, playing along with the fantasy, and then Margaret came to her and hugged her tight. "Thank you," Margaret whispered. "That was the most beautiful concert I've ever heard." Claire would have loved it. Eleanor felt her heart break a little. "You're welcome, Mrs. Whitmore." "Now it's my turn," Margaret said. "I want to play for you." Margaret sat at the piano. She placed her shaking hands on the keys, and then slowly and carefully she began to play for Elise. She made mistakes. She had to stop and start again several times. Her fingers stumbled over the notes. But she played it. She played the whole piece from beginning to end. It took her nearly 10 minutes, but she did it. When she finished, Eleanor clapped with real joy. "That was wonderful. You did it! You learned the whole piece." Margaret looked at her hands on the piano keys. She looked surprised and proud and sad all at the same time. "I did it. I really did it. You should be so proud of yourself. That was months of hard work." Margaret turned on the piano bench and looked at Eleanor with very serious eyes. "I need to tell you something important. Before I forget everything. Before my mind is completely gone. You don't have to—" "No, I do. Please listen." Margaret took Eleanor's hands. "You have been such a gift to me. These months with you have been the happiest I've had in 10 years. You made me remember why I loved music. You made me feel alive again." "You've been a gift to me too," Eleanor said, tears in her eyes. "I want you to have something." Margaret stood up and went to the desk in the corner. She opened a drawer and took out a sealed envelope. "Take this, but don't open it yet. Open it when the time is right. You'll know when." Eleanor took the envelope. It was thick and heavy. "What is it?" "A letter. A thank you, a wish for your future." Margaret smiled. "Promise me you won't open it until the right time." "I promise. But Mrs. Whitmore, you don't need to give me anything. Teaching you has been reward enough. Nevertheless, take it. It's important to me." Eleanor put the envelope in her bag. She felt strange about it, but she could see it mattered to Margaret. "Thank you." They cleaned up the living room together, blowing out candles and putting away chairs. Margaret seemed tired now. The excitement of the recital had worn her out. "I think I need to rest," Margaret said. "Will you help me upstairs?" Eleanor had never been upstairs in the house before. She helped Margaret climb the grand staircase slowly. Margaret's bedroom was large and beautiful, with old furniture and faded wallpaper. Photos of her husband and Claire covered every surface. Eleanor helped Margaret out of the evening gown and into a nightgown. The old woman seemed very frail suddenly, like she might break. Eleanor tucked her into bed like a child. "Stay with me until I fall asleep?" Margaret asked. "Of course." Eleanor sat in a chair next to the bed. Margaret's eyes were already closing. "Eleanor? Yes?" "You have such a good heart. Don't let the world make you hard. Don't let difficulty steal your kindness. Promise me." "I promise. And follow your dreams. Don't give them up like I did. Life is too short to live for everyone else." Eleanor wanted to ask what dreams Margaret had given up, but the old woman was already asleep, breathing softly. Eleanor sat there for a while, watching her sleep. She thought about all the things Margaret had told her over the months. About dancing. About love. About music. About loss. Eleanor went downstairs and found Rosa in the kitchen. "Is she okay?" Rosa asked. "She's sleeping." "But Rosa, is she getting worse?" Rosa nodded sadly. "Yes, the doctor says the dementia is progressing faster now. She has maybe 6 months before she won't recognize anyone anymore." Eleanor felt like someone had hit her in the stomach. 6 months? Maybe less. We can't know for sure. But she's declining quickly now. Eleanor went home that night feeling heavy with sadness. 6 months, maybe less. And then Margaret would be lost in her own mind, unable to remember the piano lessons or their friendship or anything. The envelope in her bag felt heavy too. She was tempted to open it, but she had promised Margaret. And Eleanor kept her promises. The next week, Eleanor arrived for a lesson and found Margaret very confused. She did not recognize Eleanor at first. "Who are you?" "Why are you in my house?" Margaret demanded. "It's me, Eleanor, your piano teacher. We have a lesson today." Margaret stared at her with suspicious eyes. "I don't have a piano teacher. And Claire does her lessons on Wednesdays, not today." Eleanor's heart sank. Margaret thought Claire was still alive. She was lost in the past, back when Claire was still a little girl taking piano lessons. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said gently. "I must have gotten the day wrong. I'll come back another time." But as Eleanor turned to leave, Margaret suddenly grabbed her arm. "Wait, don't go. I know you. You're the kind one. The one who brings cookies. Yes, that's me. Stay. Please stay. I don't like being alone." So Eleanor stayed. They did not have a lesson. They just sat together. Eleanor played piano and Margaret listened. Sometimes Margaret hummed along. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she smiled. This became the new pattern. Some days Margaret remembered Eleanor. Some days she did not. Some days they could work on music. Some days they just sat together in silence. Richard visited more often now. He saw his mother's decline and felt guilty for all the years he had wasted being angry. He thanked Eleanor again and again for bringing music back into his mother's life. "She's happier now than she's been in years," Richard told Eleanor, "even with the dementia getting worse. Because of you, her last months have meaning." Eleanor did not know what to say. She was just doing what felt right. Being kind. Being patient. Being present. One evening in late December, Rosa called Eleanor. Her voice was shaking. "You need to come to the house. Mrs. Whitmore is very sick. She has pneumonia. The ambulance is taking her to the hospital." Eleanor dropped everything and took a taxi to the hospital. She could not afford the taxi, but she did not care. She had to see Margaret. At the hospital, she found Richard in the waiting room. He looked terrible. His eyes were red from crying. When he saw Eleanor, he stood up and hugged her. "They don't think she'll make it through the night," he said. "The pneumonia is very bad. And with her age and the dementia, the doctor says her body is just too weak. Can I see her? She's been asking for you." "Come on." Richard led Eleanor to Margaret's room. The old woman lay in the hospital bed, looking tiny and fragile under white sheets. Tubes and wires connected her to machines. Her breathing was labored and rough. But when Eleanor came into the room, Margaret's eyes opened. "Eleanor," she whispered. "You came." Eleanor took Margaret's hand and sat beside the bed. "Of course I came. I'll always come when you need me." "I'm dying," Margaret said simply. There was no fear in her voice. "Just acceptance, don't say that. You're going to be fine." "No, dear. I know, and it's okay. I'm ready. I've been ready for a long time. I'm going to see Robert again. And Claire." "My beautiful Claire," tears ran down Eleanor's face. "I'm going to miss you so much. I'll miss you too. But you gave me such a wonderful gift. You gave me music again. You gave me hope. You gave me a friend when I was so lonely." "You gave me all those things too," Eleanor whispered. Margaret smiled weakly. "Did you open the envelope yet?" "No, you said to wait for the right time." "Good, open it. Open it when I'm gone." "Promise?" "I promise." Margaret's breathing became harder. She closed her eyes, but she still held Eleanor's hand. Richard stood on the other side of the bed, holding his mother's other hand. He was crying openly now. "I'm sorry, Mother," Richard said. "I'm so sorry for all the years I wasted being angry. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you." Margaret opened her eyes and looked at her son. "It's okay. You're here now. That's what matters." She looked from Richard to Eleanor. "Take care of each other. You're both so lonely. You both need someone." Margaret's eyes closed again. Her breathing slowed. The machines beeped steadily. Eleanor and Richard sat on either side of her bed, holding her hands. They sat like that for hours. Nurses came and went. Doctors checked the machines. But Eleanor and Richard did not move. They stayed with Margaret. Just before midnight, Margaret took a deep breath and smiled. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Eleanor leaned close. "Thank you," Margaret whispered. "Thank you for giving an old woman her music back." Those were her last words. A few minutes later, her breathing stopped. The machines made a long, steady beep. Nurses rushed in. But Eleanor and Richard knew. Margaret was gone. They stood on either side of the bed, still holding her hands. And they cried together, for Margaret, for Claire, for all the time that was lost and could never be found again, for the unfairness of death and dementia and all the things that steal people from us too soon. Later, when they left the hospital, Richard walked Eleanor to her taxi. He looked exhausted and broken. "The funeral is on Saturday," he said. "Will you come?" "Of course. Will you play piano?" "At the service?" She would have wanted that. Eleanor nodded. She could not speak. Her throat was too tight with grief. Richard hugged her one more time. "Thank you for being her friend. Thank you for making her last months beautiful." Eleanor went home and cried. She cried for hours. She had known Margaret for only 6 months, but it felt like she had lost someone she had known her whole life. The envelope sat in her drawer. Eleanor looked at it but did not open it, not yet. She had promised to wait for the right time, and somehow she knew that time had not come yet. First, there would be a funeral. First, she would say goodbye properly. Then she would open the envelope and learn what Margaret had wanted to tell her. Eleanor did not know that the envelope would change her life forever. She did not know that Margaret's last gift would be bigger than anything she could imagine. She did not know that this was just the beginning of the story, not the end. All she knew was that she had lost a friend, and her heart was broken. Saturday came too quickly. Eleanor woke up on the morning of the funeral feeling empty inside. She put on her only black dress and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked tired and sad. Her mother was having a good day and insisted on coming to the funeral. "You loved her," her mother said. "And she loved you. I should be there to support you." They took a taxi to the church. It was a beautiful old building with tall windows and dark wooden pews. Eleanor helped her mother inside, walking slowly because her mother's heart was weak. Eleanor was surprised by how few people were there. Maybe 20 people filled the big church. Margaret had been so accomplished, so important in her younger days. But most of her friends were gone now, dead or too old to travel. The people who came were mostly Richard's colleagues and neighbors who barely knew Margaret. It made Eleanor sad. Margaret had lived such a big life, full of music and love and joy. And now so few people came to say goodbye. Richard saw Eleanor and came over. He hugged her and her mother. "Thank you for coming." "Both of you?" "Of course," Eleanor said. "Where do you want me to play?" "There's a piano up front. Whenever you're ready. You can play during the service after I give the eulogy." The service started. A priest said words about life and death and heaven. Eleanor barely heard them. She kept looking at the closed casket at the front of the church. Margaret was in there, the woman who had become her friend, the woman who had believed in her kindness when her own son did not. Then Richard stood up to give the eulogy. He walked to the front of the church slowly. He looked like he had not slept in days. "My mother was an amazing woman," Richard began. His voice shook. "She was a dancer in her youth. She married a conductor. She loved music more than almost anything. She had a son who disappointed her, and a granddaughter who was her whole world." Richard paused, gathering himself. "When my daughter Claire died 10 years ago, something in my mother died too. She stopped dancing. She stopped playing piano. She stopped being the joyful person she had been. And I blamed her for pushing Claire too hard. I blamed her for Claire's death. And I stayed away." Several people in the church shifted uncomfortably. This was more honest than most eulogies. "I wasted 10 years being angry," Richard continued. 10 years when I could have been with her. 10 years when she needed me and I was not there. I will regret that for the rest of my life." Richard looked directly at Eleanor. 6 months ago, my mother hired a piano teacher, a young woman named Eleanor Martinez. I thought she was trying to take advantage of my mother. I accused her of terrible things, but I was wrong. Eleanor felt everyone's eyes turn to look at her. She wanted to disappear. Eleanor taught my mother to play again. She was patient when my mother's memory failed. She was kind when my mother was confused. She brought joy back into my mother's life. And through Eleanor, I found my way back to my mother too. Eleanor gave us both a gift. She reminded us what matters: kindness, patience, love. Richard wiped tears from his eyes. My mother died happy because of Eleanor. She died knowing she was loved. She died with music in her heart. And I am grateful for that. I am grateful to Eleanor. And I am grateful that my mother had these last 6 months of joy before the dementia took her completely. Richard sat down. The priest nodded to Eleanor. It was time for her to play. Eleanor walked to the piano on shaking legs. She sat down and looked at the keys. What should she play? She had prepared several pieces, but now only one felt right. She began to play for Elise, the song Margaret had wanted to learn, the song that meant so much to her because it was Claire's first piece. Eleanor played it slowly and carefully, exactly the way she had taught Margaret. She played it with all the love and sadness in her heart. She played it as a goodbye, as a thank you, as a promise that she would never forget. When she finished, there was silence in the church. Then someone started crying. Then someone else. The music had touched something in everyone there. After the service, people came to talk to Eleanor. They thanked her for the beautiful music. They told her stories about Margaret that she had never heard, about parties and concerts and the amazing life Margaret had lived before grief and loneliness had shrunk her world. Rosa hugged Eleanor tight. Mrs. Whitmore loved you so much. You made her final months happy. That's the greatest gift you could have given her. I loved her too, Eleanor whispered. The funeral ended. People slowly left. Eleanor and her mother stayed until almost everyone was gone. Eleanor stood looking at the casket, saying a private goodbye. Richard came over. Will you come to the reading of the will? Next Tuesday at 10 in the morning. At my lawyer's office, Eleanor was confused. Why would I come to that? That's for family. Please, just come. My mother wanted you there. Eleanor did not understand, but she agreed. Okay, I'll be there. That night, Eleanor finally opened the envelope Margaret had given her. She sat on her bed and broke the seal carefully. Inside was a letter in Margaret's handwriting. The writing was shaky but readable. My dear Eleanor, the letter began. If you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry I had to leave you, but I am not sorry for the time we had together. You brought light into my dark world. You gave me purpose when I had none. You treated me with dignity and respect when I felt like a burden to everyone around me. I want you to know something important. I knew from the beginning that you were not trying to take advantage of me. I knew you were genuine. Your kindness was real. Richard did not believe me, but I knew. I have watched you struggle with money. I have seen how hard you work. I have heard you talk about your dreams of performing music. Dreams you gave up to take care of your mother. You are young and talented, and you should not have to sacrifice your dreams. I have made arrangements. My lawyer will explain everything. Do not feel guilty about what I have done. It is my choice. It is my gift to you. Use it well. Use it to make your dreams come true. Use it to help others the way you helped me. And remember, Eleanor, kindness is never wasted. Every cookie you baked, every extra minute you stayed, every word of encouragement you gave me mattered. You changed my life. You gave me hope. You gave me joy. That is worth more than anything money can buy. Live a beautiful life, dear girl. Play music. Love deeply, be kind. And know that somewhere an old woman is grateful for you. Forever grateful. With love, Margaret. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. She cried. She did not understand what Margaret meant about arrangements and my gift to you. But the love in the letter was clear. Margaret had cared about her. Truly cared. Tuesday morning came. Eleanor dressed in her best clothes and took the bus to the lawyer's office downtown. It was in a tall building with marble floors and expensive furniture. Eleanor felt out of place. Richard was already there, along with Rosa and a few people Eleanor did not recognize. They all sat in a conference room with a long table. A lawyer in a suit sat at the head of the table. Now that everyone is here, we can begin, the lawyer said. He opened a folder and took out papers. I am reading the last will and testament of Margaret Ann Whitmore. The lawyer read through legal language that Eleanor did not understand. He talked about assets and estates and trusts. Then he got to the specific gifts. To my loyal housekeeper, Rosa Martinez, I leave $50,000 in my thanks for years of faithful service. Rosa gasped and started crying. $50,000 was more money than she had ever imagined. To my son, Richard Whitmore, I leave my husband's entire music collection, all photographs and personal items, and the remainder of my financial estate, totaling approximately $2 million. Richard nodded. He had expected this. He was already wealthy and did not need the money, but he appreciated the gesture. Then the lawyer looked at Eleanor. To Eleanor Martinez, piano teacher and dear friend, I leave the following. Eleanor's heart beat fast. What could Margaret have left her? Maybe a book? A piece of jewelry? First, I leave you the Steinway grand piano, valued at approximately $150,000. Eleanor's mouth fell open. The piano? The beautiful Steinway? She could not believe it, but the lawyer was not finished. Second, I leave you the house at 847 Elmwood Avenue and all its contents. Eleanor felt dizzy. The house? The entire house? That was impossible. Houses in that neighborhood were worth millions. Third, I leave you a trust fund in the amount of $500,000, designated specifically for the pursuit of your musical education and career. This money can only be used for music-related expenses such as lessons, concerts, recordings, or education. Eleanor could not breathe. $500,000? Plus a house? Plus the piano? This was not real. This could not be real. Richard was smiling. He did not look surprised or angry. He looked happy. There is also a letter to be read aloud, the lawyer said. He picked up another paper. This is from Mrs. Whitmore, written 3 months ago when she updated her will. The lawyer read, "To my dear son Richard, I know this may surprise you, but I ask you to understand my reasons. Eleanor brought joy back into my life when I had given up hope. She was kind when she did not have to be. She was patient when others would have quit. She sacrificed her own time and comfort to make an old woman happy. She deserves this gift. She deserves the chance to follow her dreams. Please do not contest this will. Please honor my wishes, and please continue to be kind to Eleanor. She will need guidance as she figures out what to do with this inheritance. Be the man I raised you to be. Help her. Love, Mother." The lawyer finished reading. There was silence in the room. Eleanor finally found her voice. "I can't accept this. It's too much. Richard, this should be yours. The house, the money, all of it. You're her son." But Richard shook his head. "My mother wanted you to have it. And honestly, Eleanor, I'm glad she did. You gave her something I could not give her, peace, joy, purpose. You deserve this. But I was just her piano teacher. I was just doing my job." "No," Richard said firmly. "You were never just her piano teacher. You were her friend. You were the daughter she lost when Claire died. You were the person who saw past her illness and treated her with dignity. That's worth more than any amount of money." Eleanor started crying. She could not help it. This was overwhelming, life-changing, impossible to believe. Rosa came over and hugged her. "Mrs. Whitmore chose well. You will do good things with this gift. I know you will." The lawyer explained more details. Eleanor would need to sign papers. She would need to learn how to manage the trust fund. She would need to decide what to do with the house. But all of that could wait. For now, she just needed to process what had happened. Eleanor left the lawyer's office in a daze. She took the bus home, but she barely remembered the ride. She kept thinking about Margaret, about the piano lessons, about the cookies and the conversations and the music. She had been kind to an old woman. That was all. She had been patient and genuine and caring, and somehow that had led to this, to an inheritance that would change her entire life. When Eleanor got home, she told her mother everything. Her mother cried tears of joy. "You can finally follow your dreams," her mother said. "You can study music properly. You can perform. You can do everything you gave up to take care of me. And I can take care of you properly," Eleanor said. "I can pay for your medical bills. I can hire nurses to help. I can make sure you're comfortable." They hugged each other and cried together. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor made decisions about her new life. She decided to keep the house, but she would not live there alone in that big empty space. Instead, she would turn it into something Margaret would have loved. She created a music school, the Claire Whitmore Academy for Young Musicians. She would offer free and low-cost piano lessons to children who could not afford them. She would give them the gift of music, just like Margaret and Claire had loved music. She hired teachers. She fixed up the house. She put Margaret's photos on the walls along with photos of Claire at her piano recitals. She put a plaque in the entrance hall that read, "In memory of Margaret Whitmore and Claire Whitmore, who believed that music and kindness can change the world." Eleanor also used the trust fund to study music properly. She took advanced lessons. She started performing in small concerts. She recorded her music. She slowly built a career as a professional pianist. Every concert she gave, she donated half the money to the music school. She wanted to help other young people the way Margaret had helped her. Richard became involved with the school too. He served on the board of directors and helped with fundraising. He and Eleanor became close friends, bound together by their love for Margaret and their shared grief over her loss. Rosa came to work at the school as the administrator. Eleanor paid her well and gave her benefits. They became like family. 1 year after Margaret's death, the music school opened its doors. 50 students enrolled in the first year. Children from poor families who would never have been able to afford music lessons. Children who reminded Eleanor of herself when she was young, dreaming of music but unable to pursue it. Eleanor taught many of the classes herself, and on the first day of each new term, she taught every student the same piece, Für Elise. She told them about Margaret and Claire. She told them about kindness and patience and how small acts of love can change lives. The students learned that music was not just about notes and rhythm. It was about connection, about emotion, about being present with another person and sharing something beautiful. 5 years passed. The music school grew. Eleanor's performing career flourished. She played concerts around the world, always returning home to teach at the school. Her mother's health improved with proper care, and she lived to see Eleanor's success. Eleanor never forgot the lesson Margaret had taught her. That kindness matters, that taking time to truly see another person matters, that patience and compassion are never wasted. On the anniversary of Margaret's death each year, Eleanor held a special concert at the school. She played Fir-Elise and told Margaret's story to anyone who would listen. She wanted people to know that this beautiful school, this amazing opportunity for children, had started with something simple. Piano lessons for a lonely old woman, cookies baked with love, extra minutes spent talking and laughing, genuine care given freely. She wanted people to know that you never know how your kindness will ripple out into the world. You never know who you might help or what might come from a simple act of compassion. Eleanor often thought about that first phone call from Margaret, how desperate she had been for money, how she had almost not answered the phone because she was so tired, how close she had come to missing this opportunity. But she had answered. She had gone to that big, sad house. She had been patient with a confused old woman. She had baked cookies and stayed late and cared genuinely, and it had changed everything. Not because she wanted a reward, not because she expected anything, but because being kind was who she was. And Margaret had seen that, had recognized it, had honored it. In the entrance hall of the music school next to Margaret's photograph, Eleanor hung the letter Margaret had written her. The letter about kindness never being wasted. She wanted every student, every teacher, every visitor to see it, to read it, to remember it, because Margaret was right. Kindness is never wasted. Every small act of compassion matters. Every moment of genuine care creates ripples that spread out into the world in ways we can never predict. Eleanor had learned that lesson from a lonely old woman who wanted to play one simple piano tune. And now she spent her life teaching that lesson to others. She taught it through music, through patience, through the school that gave opportunity to children who had none, through the concerts she gave and the money she donated and the time she spent with students who needed encouragement. She taught it by living a life that honored Margaret's memory. By being kind even when it was hard. By being patient even when she was tired. By seeing people, truly seeing them, and treating them with dignity and respect. That was Margaret's real gift. Not the money or the house or the piano. Those were wonderful, yes. Life-changing, yes. But the real gift was the lesson, the example. The reminder that how we treat each other matters more than anything else. Eleanor sat at the Steinway piano in the school's main room, the same piano that had belonged to Margaret. She played Fir-Elise, the song that had brought them together, the song that had changed her life. And she smiled, knowing that somewhere Margaret was smiling too. Proud of what Eleanor had built, happy that her final act of kindness had created something beautiful that would last long after both of them were gone. The music filled the school. Students in other rooms stopped to listen. Teachers paused in their work. Everyone knew this song. Everyone knew its story. And everyone knew that they were part of something special. Something that had started with a simple piano lesson and a kind heart. Something that would continue for generations to come. That was the true inheritance. Not money or property, but the knowledge that kindness, patience, and love can change the world. One person at a time. One piano lesson at a time. One act of compassion at a time. Eleanor played the final notes of Fir-Elise and let them fade into silence. Then she stood up, smiled at the portrait of Margaret on the wall, and went to teach her next class. There were students waiting. Children who needed to learn music. Children who needed to learn that they mattered. Children who needed someone to be patient and kind and genuinely care about them, just like Eleanor had once needed someone to care about her. And Margaret had answered that need. Now it was Eleanor's turn to answer that need for others. And she would for the rest of her life. That was her promise to Margaret. That was how she would say thank you, by passing on the gift she had been given, the gift of kindness, the gift of hope, the gift of believing that ordinary people doing ordinary acts of compassion can create extraordinary change.